These are some fantastic JRPGs that you can't miss. And I want to talk about 10 that did come back in the form of an HD remaster or remake. There have been so many awesome old JRPGs that have returned, especially on the Switch. Games like Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, the Persona games. These have been incredible to play on modern hardware. But the Switch bonus is that we have physical editions. What a time to be alive! And with the Switch 2 having backwards compatibility on the horizon, there has never been a better time to pick these up. So I went through all of my remasters and remakes I bought for the Switch, admired them, felt a surge of nostalgia, and narrowed it down to these top 10 retro JRPGs that you need to play. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of retro games with a major dose of RPGs and nostalgia, then why don't you remember how much that subscribe button meant to you back in 2006, realize how old you are, and subscribe because of nostalgia. Or pain. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and ring that notification bell. Alright, let's get into it. First up, I gotta talk about the Lunar Remastered Collection. Look, if you grew up in the 90s and had access to the Sega CD, a PS1, or one of these amazing complete editions with art books, cloth maps, and foil stamped manuals, then chances are you already know. Released in the early 90s and remade for the PS1 in the late 90s, these games were unbelievable for their time. Full voice acting, anime cutscenes, and stories that felt personal, emotional, and romantically epic. And that's with the fact that Silver Star had nearly 1/3 of the project scrapped by the game's release due to time constraints. These games are what put working designs on the map. This was a smaller publisher that brought over games like Ark the Lad, Vanguard Bandits, Magic Knight Rayearth, and many others. As for me, my first game in the series was Lunar Legend. And I know, for old fans of the series, this is largely considered the worst one. But listen, I loved that game. Until, of course, it glitched on me at the end when I needed a special sword to beat the boss, and it replaced it with some standard swords so I couldn't actually beat the game. In which case, I hated it. Later on, after I recovered from the trauma, I played Silver Star Harmony on the PSP, and these games are just as good, if not better, than you remember. Classic, cozy JRPGs. Lunar the Silver Star follows Alex, a small-town dreamer who wants to be like his hero, the Dragon Master Dime. He sets out with his friends, childhood sweetheart Luna, goofball inventor Ramus, and the flying cat named Null, who never stops talking, and ends up in this globe-spanning quest involving dragons and destiny and heartbreak and way too much innuendo for some kids running around. Seriously, who wrote this script? Lunar Eternal Blue is the sequel that takes place 1,000 years later and hits even harder. You play as Hero, who encounters a mysterious girl named Lucia sent from the Blue Star to stop an evil god's resurrection. It's darker, deeper, and arguably the better of the two, but you get both in this collection. These games aren't really about saving the world with brute force. They're about love and friendship and growing up and making impossible choices. It's the kind of storytelling that sticks with you, and the music is really, really good. That'll stick with you too. As for the gameplay, the Lunar games are old-school turn-based JRPGs, but with a lot of flair for their time. On the battlefield grid, positioning actually matters since characters and enemies have reach. It's not full tactic style, but you do have to think about who's standing where when spells start to fly, especially when it comes to bosses. And random battles here are a thing of the past. Or future? And the town interactions and NPCs are top tier. Lunar wasn't afraid to pack its world with personality and jokes. There is so much sass in some of these old school scripts, and I can't emphasize enough, if you haven't played these games, to talk to everyone. And while the remaster has been critiqued for being sort of the bare minimum, I personally don't mind. Sure, they could have done more with these and brought them back in a different way, made them HD 2D or something, but it's just great to have access to these games again, and playing it on the Switch is perfect for these classics. But even if you're not a Switch fan, you can play them almost anywhere. Just get one of those physicals if you can. The PS1 versions are very expensive, and I imagine this one will be too. Next up, Persona 4 Golden. It took them way too long to get this game on the Switch. But hey, at least it's here. And I know what some of you are saying. There's probably a remake coming a la Persona 3 Reload, so why bother? And you're probably right, but who cares? This one is one of the GOATs. Persona 4 Golden succeeded the first game that came out at the end of the PS2 cycle. It was the upgraded definitive edition that took an already incredible game to the next level by adding a new character and essentially a third act. And I mean it, Persona 4 was already considered to be one of the best games of all time. When it was finally cut from the chains of the PS Vita, Limited Run gave us physical copies of this game on all platforms. What? I've told this story on the podcast before, but I had no experience with Persona at all until I was talking with this employee at a GameStop where I lived in Wheaton, Illinois. I believe his name was Tony, if he happens to be watching this at some point. Anyway, he told me it was the greatest game on the Vita, if not the greatest game of all time, which is very high praise. So I decided to take a chance on it, and it absolutely blew me out of the water. I'm of course recommending the Switch version in this video, but honestly, wherever you play this game, you will not regret it. Speaking of our podcast, if you haven't already seen it, I started the Level Up Legacy podcast with my man Slam Zany. If you enjoy longer form content where we talk about JRPGs, do lists, and wax poetic about our favorite games, then go check it out and subscribe. We're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers over there. I'll leave a link in the description. Anyway, you play as a transfer student who rolls into the sleepy, rural town of Inaba, where the biggest crime used to be someone stealing too many cabbages. My cabbages! Until people started showing up. Inside TVs. Yeah, inside the TVs. You and your Scooby-Doo gang of high school misfits stumble upon a hidden world inside the television, complete with these shadow monsters and dungeons and creepy shadow versions of your innermost insecurities. Because, you know, puberty wasn't hard enough. This game is a wild blend of slice-of-life sim and turn-based dungeon crawler. 1 minute you're studying for exams and hanging out with your classmates, and the next you're fighting nightmarish monsters with the power of your persona, this psychic projection of your true self that also knows magic and how to punch shadows in the face. The main character, canonically known as You, has the ability to fuse personas to create more powerful personas. So if the gotta catch 'em all mechanic and getting personas wasn't enough, you also have fusing. Cool new personas and the inheritance of skills, which can create some crazy personas. It's my kind of game. And of course, there's the classic Persona social links, where your connections with other characters in and outside your party can benefit you in and outside the dungeons. So the better your bonds, the better your personas. It's basically an RPG where emotional intelligence is just as important as your attack stat. And you need to know that it's okay to use a guide. Seriously. I know Persona 4 Golden isn't as retro, but it's retro enough. I had to talk about this game. And Atlas, don't you dare give us a remake of base Persona 4. It better be Golden Deluxe Rewind Extra Epic Edition 2000. Next up, Suikoden 1 and 2 HD Remaster. Another collection of the insanely priced PS1 classics you should definitely pick up physically for the Switch. And play, of course. Sure, you could get it digitally on the Vita, pull out your old Vita TV, and kind of have the Switch-like experience, but this is the remastered version, and it's much less hassle on the Switch. Suikoden launched in 1995 on the original PlayStation, back when most RPGs were simply content to have you go save the world, maybe fight some godlike being telling you can't do what you want. But Suikoden said, what if you started a rebellion against a corrupt empire and then recruited a chef, a ninja, several squirrels that can fight together, and a vampire to help you do it? Then came Suikoden 2 in 1998, which somehow took everything from the first game, story, characters, combat, emotional trauma, and turned it up to 11. It's widely considered one of the greatest, if not most foundational JRPGs of all time, and until now, the physical version has been stuck in PS1 and eBay limbo for the low price of... But here we are, ladies and gents, Konami finally did something good. Was it strongly inspired by the attention Ayuden Chronicle was getting? Probably, but hey, we got it. And my friends, it is beautiful. Refined sprites, redrawn portraits, updated UI, fast-forward options. This is what I'm talking about. Suikoden 1 tells the story of a young hero, the son of an imperial general, who ends up leading a revolution against the very government he was raised to serve, after realizing the depths of the corruption in that government when getting involved with one of the 27 true runes, a theme that repeats itself in the series as a whole. The main character, canonically known as Tyr in the official materials, gets pulled into the Liberation Army by one Victor, and through a number of crazy circumstances ends up taking on the mantle of the new Liberation Army leader, where he secures an abandoned castle, beefs it up, recruits hundreds of allies, and makes it the most hilarious and cozy fortress you've ever known. And this was the foundation of the franchise. And Suikoden 2 hits you with one of the greatest betrayals in JRPG history. You play as a silent protagonist caught between a war, a brutal prince, and your former best friend who becomes your greatest rival. And many of the characters from the first find their way into the second game as well. I will say no more. Each game revolves around gathering the 108 Stars of Destiny, those recruitable characters who join the cause. And the uniqueness doesn't end with all that. Every single one of these games in the series has basically 3 different types of combat. First, standard turn-based battles with a 6-person parties where battles are random. But there's depth to the classic turn-based battles with unite attacks between specific characters. You also have duels, which are these 1v1 rock, paper, scissors style showdowns where the right choice can decide the fate of nations. Okay, maybe it's not that dramatic, but it's still super cool. And finally, the army battles. Massive strategic conflicts where your choices, units, and recruits actually matter in the outcome. And the HD Remaster adds in much needed quality of life features. Here's to hoping we see more of this. 3, 4, 5, they should all be coming, I hope. Next up, Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition. I'm sorry, but you're not going to be getting out of a retro Brandon list without me mentioning Xenoblade at some point. It's retro enough for me and too good not to mention. Xenoblade Chronicles first released on the Wii in 2010. Yes, the Wii, the same console we used to play Wii Sports Bowling with Grandma, also gave us a sprawling, emotional, 100+ hour JRPG epic. But there was only one problem. It was only released in Japan. That is, until Operation Rainfall went to bat for those of us who didn't know what we were missing. And after a couple of years, Xenoblade, along with The Last Story and Pandora's Tower, finally came to the Wii in the US. Originally developed by Monolith Soft, the same brilliant minds behind Xenosaga and Baten Kaitos, Xenoblade Chronicles took everything we loved about the genre: massive open-world exploration, real-time strategic combat, a top-tier soundtrack, and a story that hit so hard in the feels you needed a break before taking on the next game. Then in 2020, we got the Definitive Edition on the Nintendo Switch. A full visual overhaul, upgraded UI, quality of life fixes, remastered music, and an entire epilogue story called Future Connected. Oh, and since then, the Switch has become the home of the entire Xenoblade series. Don't miss this one, guys. For real. This game takes place on the literal bodies of 2 ancient titans, Bionis and Mechonis, who fought eons ago, froze in time, and now support entire civilizations living on their corpses. Yes, the land is made of dead giants. Welcome to the ride, baby. You play as Shulk, a young science-y dude with the hair of a boy band star and the Monado, a legendary sword that can show him the future. After a devastating attack from the mechanical Mechon forces on their colony, Shulk sets off on an adventure for revenge, only to uncover a plot that goes way beyond your standard good versus evil. Like, way beyond. What starts as a personal tale of vengeance spirals into this cosmic narrative about fate and free will and things I can't spoil because I care about you too much if you haven't played this masterpiece. And somehow, through all the metaphysical craziness, it never stops being incredibly human. And really, I could say that for the entire series. You will love these characters. Except maybe the Nopon. Depends on what kind of personality you have. Now, the one thing you may have heard about Xenoblade is that the gameplay can be complicated. And I'm here to tell you that it's really not that complicated. Combat is real time with some MMO vibes, sure. You do this auto attack, you position yourself for bonus effects, and manage cooldown based arts. Positioning does matter, timing matters, and the combos are pretty straightforward. Break, topple, daze. And you can take on some crazy enemies later by what's called topple locking. So just position your characters that way and you'll get it over time. And when you get it, you'll really be feeling it like the rest of us.
I'm really feeling it!
Now, to be fair, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this to someone who's never played a JRPG before, but if you're here because you're a fan of the genre, you'll be fine. And there are these side quests, heart-to-hearts, monster hunting, colony building, crafting, gem forging. This is just straight up a JRPG buffet. Oh, and the future connected epilogue, it's a whole bonus adventure set after the main game with a smaller cast, new mechanics, and a story that connects to the other games in the trilogy. Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition is one of those games I can recommend to the highest degree. Recently, I told one of my friends that this trilogy is worth playing if it's the last series you ever play. And then Expedition 33 came out, and whew, that's for a different list. Next up, Grandia HD Collection. Another collection! I swear, this isn't cheating for a top 10 list. They come like this. Now, I will say this one's a bit pricier to get physically because it was a limited run edition, but this collection is worth shouting out all the same. Originally released back in 1997 on the Sega Saturn and then hitting the PlayStation in 1999, Grandia was like Final Fantasy's quirky younger cousin who just wanted to go exploring and ended up saving the world by accident. These games were made by Game Arts, the same devs who brought us the Lunar series, with a focus on providing the team's existing fan base with good games rather than trying to follow market trends.
You don't say!
The Grandia HD Collection is like this treasure trove of nostalgic 90s JRPG goodness with a bright sense of optimism and adventure. These are classic Fem Trooper style games. The first Grandia follows Justin, a young adventurer with an over-the-top sense of curiosity. It's a globe-trotting adventure that starts with ruins, ditching mom to set off on an adventure like his father, and then, saving the world. Classic JRPG escalation. Grandia 2, meanwhile, gets a little edgier as you play as Ryudo, a grumpy mercenary with a bird for a sidekick, like someone asked, what if Squall from Final Fantasy VIII had a sense of humor and better party dynamics? Both games pack heart, charm, and that old school talk to every NPC or miss out on the best item energy. And there are definitely some scenes that hit much harder than you might expect. But what really takes the cake for me is the battle system in these games. First, no random encounters here. You have enemies on screen and you can sneak up on them and strike and attack first. Once in battle, you have this hybrid real-time turn-based system where every action is on a timeline. You can interrupt enemy attacks if you time it just right, which turns each fight into this wild game of chicken. And the repeated use of weapons and spells leads to learning new abilities, which can also lead to stat increases, and I am a sucker for skill grinding. All this makes the battles way more interesting, and the gameplay loop is super addicting. Grandia 2 introduces some more movement, and then you can attack and retreat. You can use things like critical to try canceling the enemy's next move. You can use combos that can be increased with accessories, getting up to 4 hits, and your characters learn magic from equipping these mana eggs. Both combat systems are very fun and will keep you invested. But it's not just the combat, there's a lot of charm in the exploration. You've got these dungeons with puzzles, towns that feel alive, and party banter that's frequent, funny, and surprisingly heartwarming. At the end of the day, this is a straight-up comfort food JRPG. The visuals got a bit of a glow-up, although some might argue differently, and the soundtrack still slaps. And here's to hoping we get Grandia 3 one day as well. I don't really know what the internet thinks of 3, but I still personally loved it on the PS2. Let me know in the comment section below. Next up, Star Ocean: The Second Story R. I mean, you knew this one had to be on the list, right? This is a downright incredible remaster. Remake? Star Ocean First Departure R is also available on the Switch, but not physically for some reason.
Why are you the way that you are?
And while I think both are worth checking out, in my opinion, Star Ocean The Second Story R is a must-play. Star Ocean The Second Story first dropped in 1998 for the PS1 and was made by Tri-Ace and published by Enix. Yes, pre-Square Enix merger days. This was the second entry in the Star Ocean series and arguably the one that defined it. Then in 2008 and 2009, we got the PSP remasters, which is where I originally picked up and played them after falling in love with Star Ocean 3 till the end of time on the PS2. And let's get that one remade with the same love that we got for this particular remake. Fast forward 25 years from the original release and boom, we got Star Ocean The Second Story R in 2023. A full-blown, remade from the ground up 2.5D masterpiece. It's got the sprite art so clean it makes your PS1 want to cry, a new combat polish, updated voice acting, and enough quality of life updates to make it not only the definitive way to play this game, but one of the best retro remakes on the platform, hands down. Not all remakes are created equal, but this should have really set the standard for everybody else. This one starts in classic Star Ocean fashion. High-tech sci-fi ship, cool uniforms, some light space exploration, and then something goes terribly wrong and the main character finds himself stranded on some medieval fantasy planet. Classic. You play as either Claude C. Kenny, space cadet with daddy issues and a phaser, or Raina Lanford, blue-haired mystery girl with healing powers and a cryptic backstory. Whichever character you choose changes how the story unfolds and who joins your party. Which means, yes, the replay value is through the roof. This game is set 20 years after the original game, and after getting sucked through a portal to expel, Claude, who is mistaken for the hero of Light because he has a phase gun, gets pulled into a plot that has massive ramifications for not just the planet, but the entire universe. The Star Ocean. Basically, this plot is if you shoved Final Fantasy, Star Trek, and a shonen anime into a blender and then hit this awesome button. Combat in the Second Story R is action-based, real-time, and smooth as butter. You control one character while the others do their thing based on AI settings, but now you can freely switch between party members mid-fight, chain special moves, and absolutely wreck your enemies. The new break system lets you stagger enemies for massive combos, and the revamped UI actually tells you what the heck is happening. And you can find 6 other characters from the other games, including Fate from Till the End of Time. But some of my favorite parts of this game are the private actions, skills, and item creation. I'm always a sucker for character interactions because it's fun being able to build relationships in games like this, but there are like 80 possible endings in this game, and they are massively impacted by the relationships and the decisions that you make in this game. So it made it feel like the branching paths of one of those, 90s choose-your-own-adventure books. And the skills and item creation both increase the stats of your characters and give you opportunities to break the game. And if you've been around for a while, you know how much I love breaking games.
I can break you without breaking a single law.
Seriously, you can make these goodie boxes that give you a chance of getting weapons like the Sword of Marvels very early in the game, and it makes Claude an absolute monster. So between the classic retro goodness, character relationships, and the in-depth build and mechanics, this one is an absolute banger, and you can't miss it. Next up, Baten Kaitos 1 and 2. There are not enough people talking about these games. These games were part of a very small pool of JRPGs on the GameCube, and man was I searching. At the time I played these originally, I had no idea the pedigree of the dev team that was behind these games. They were developed by Monolith Soft. Yeah, the same studio that would go on to bless us with Xenoblade Chronicles and Tri Crescendo, who previously worked on the sound development for games like Valkyrie Profile and Star Ocean. Tetsuya Takahashi started Monolith Soft after leaving Squaresoft with some other former employees who worked on Chrono Trigger, Chrono Cross, as well as Xenogears. And these games were intended to fill the JRPG gap on the GameCube, as well as provide a distinct IP from the Xenosaga games that were currently being worked on. First game dropped in 2004, followed by the prequel in 2006, Baten Kaitos Origins. Unfortunately, these games weren't massive commercial hits, but they did kind of become cult classics as they built a reputation for their incredible art direction, unique combat, deep world building, and twisty, emotionally resonant storytelling. And now they're available on the Switch as an HD remaster, with only one major hiccup, in my opinion. The English voice acting was removed. I know the original voice acting sounded like they recorded it in a tin can, but it's still what I played back in the day. These games take place in a world where the Earth is gone, like straight up fallen away, and people live on these floating continents in the sky. Everyone has wings of the heart, except your main guy. I wonder if that'll be important. In the first game, you play as Callus. Well, kind of. You actually play as a guardian spirit, an unseen force who bonds with Callus and influences his decisions, which was a pretty cool narrative trick that turns you into the literal main character of the story. Anyway, Callus is this brooding but lovable protagonist who's on a mission of revenge after the death of his grandfather. He meets Shella, a mysterious girl with a mysterious destiny. You know how it goes. And the journey that unfolds turns into something much bigger than either of them expected. Lots of twists and turns in this one. And in Origins, you step into the shoes of Sagi, a young man bonded with another guardian spirit. You again! During a time when the Empire is experimenting with magical and mechanical hybrids called Mox. The story here is just as rich and arguably darker than the original, with heavy political undertones, loss and betrayal, and the character writing hits just as hard as my disappointment for the lack of English voice acting. Both games are layered, story-driven, and feature a kind of emotional depth that sneaks up on you once you realize how invested you've become in these characters, and how personal the stakes feel. But we have to talk about the mechanics, because this is where Baten Kaitos stands out from every other game on this list. Combat is entirely card-based, but it's not a card game in the slow and strategic sense. These fights are fast, real-time, turn-based, and often chaotic in the best way. You use these cards called Magnus that hold the essence of items, weapons, spells, and more. So you're literally swinging swords and casting spells by selecting cards from a hand that changes dynamically as the fight goes on. It might sound complicated, but it's really not. Each character can have a deck built using classic builds you'd expect from a JRPG. One deck can be entirely attack and combo focused, while the other may have support and healing cards. And some of these combo chains you can pull off can do crazy damage if you do it in the right sequence. Magnus also impacts your ability to interact with quests, characters, and areas as well. If a character needs some food, you could go find some meal and absorb the essence in a card, but that food will go bad if not used quick enough. The funny thing is, you can use some of these cards in battle, and sometimes you'll do things like poison enemies, but it'll make other food items degrade faster if it's in the same deck, so you gotta think about it. Enemies have elemental weaknesses, turn order matters, and timing is everything. Especially in Origins, where the battle system is even smoother and characters share a deck, making the pace tighter and more interactive. And the remaster adds in speed-up options, auto-battle toggles, no random encounters, something like a no-damage mode, and the cleaner UI and widescreen support. Basically everything you want from a modern remaster while keeping the soul of the original, but without the English voice acting. Have I said that already? Anyway, this is a classic hidden gem. It was passed over on the GameCube and is rarely talked about on the Switch, so I definitely recommend giving it a go, especially if you're a Xeno fan. These games are aesthetically amazing with fantastic stories and amazing soundtracks, and honestly, the Japanese voice acting is still really good. I'm just a baby.
I'm a little baby.
You can also get this bad boy physically through Amazon or PlayAsia. Next up, the Final Fantasy Pixel Remasters. 6 games for 1 spot on a top 10. Let's go! As much as I love all of the different versions of the Final Fantasy games that we've received, this is definitely the definitive way to play these classics. And this is totally cheating, but we also have 7, 8, 9, 10, 10-2, and 12 on the Switch. I'd honestly be surprised if we weren't going to get the 13 trilogy on the Switch too at some point, if not 15 and 16. If you want to see my full thoughts on the entire series so far, check out my ranking video. But before you do, yes, I admit 10 should be higher, okay? Anyway, the Pixel Remasters were released on Switch in 2023, finally bringing us Final Fantasy 1 through 6 into the modern age that's both respectful and ridiculously playable. Beautiful pixel art? Check. Reorchestrated music? Check. Quality of life updates? Ah, yes. Thank you, Square, for that blessed 4x experience multiplier and the ability to turn off random battles. Let me give you the summary of the first 6 games, so we're not here for another video's worth of time. First, Final Fantasy I. You have 4 Warriors of Light that show up with glowing crystals, no backstory, and every problem in the world drop in their lap, times broken, evils rising, and somehow it all ties back to some very timely shenanigans. It's the game that started it all, simple, classic, and surprisingly weird in the best way. In Final Fantasy II, you're rebels on the run in a world ruled by an evil empire with a new cast of named characters like Firion and a very experimental leveling system. Skills improve the more you use them, the more you get beat up depending on how you play. It's a bold narrative leap, and the first time the series really said, let's try to make you feel something. In Final Fantasy III, when darkness threatens the floating continents, a group of kids stumble into destiny via shiny crystals and an ancient prophecy. This is the game that introduced the job system, letting you switch from knight to ninja to dragoon just because you feel like it. It's charming, expansive, and the first time Final Fantasy really feels like an epic. Just know what you're doing with those jobs. In Final Fantasy IV, you have Cecil, or however you say that, a conflicted Dark Knight who realizes that maybe his bosses are a bit too evil for burning villages, because that's totally not cool. This entry brings the drama, the airships, betrayal, a killer soundtrack, and the debut of the active time battle system. If I had $1 for every character who dramatically exits the party, well, I'd have a lot of gil. Final Fantasy V brought us one of the best job systems in the series, except maybe for tactics. In this game, a mysterious meteor crashes, a bunch of crystals start breaking, and you and your party of lovable goofballs go on a world-hopping quest filled with humor and heart. It also features one of the most memorable soundtracks and boss themes in the entire franchise, and Gilgamesh. Play this game for Gilgamesh. He'll see you again. And finally, Final Fantasy VI, perhaps the single reason you should get this collection. In a world where magic is fading and machines rule, Terra, a girl with mysterious powers, becomes the center of a sprawling, character-driven epic. You've got mechs, opera houses, haunted trains that you could duplex with Sabin's muscles, and one of the most ambitious stories ever told on the Super Nintendo. For real, this one's a masterpiece, and the Pixel Remaster is the best way to experience it. You can and should play all of these games, but 4, 5, and 6 are definite highlights for me. But each game builds on the last, evolving in gameplay, storytelling, and wild experimentation, and now they're all neatly packed in a Switch-ready format, looking and sounding better than ever. And despite what you've seen from the most recent Final Fantasy games, this series kind of used to be the turn-based mechanic king. Each game brings its own flavor. In some, you buy magic, and others, you have the job system. Still others, you have equipable summons that you shouldn't take advantage of till later in the game to min-max your characters to blow the pants off of a crazy jester. The one thing people haven't been so keen on with these games over the years are the random battles. But guess what? You can turn them off. And you can 4x experience if you want to grind in one area to breeze through the next segment. The remaster also includes modern font fixes so your eyes don't cry blood trying to read this stuff, auto-battling for faster grinding to go with that 4x experience, gil boost toggles, quick saving, and music toggles so you can swap between the new orchestration and the classic chiptunes for maximum goodness. But seriously, the music itself in these games are worth the price of entry. And these quality of life features respect your adult schedule, while still giving you the full JRPG experience. Gone are the days of needing to commit 40 hours to every single entry here. You can beat them quickly, efficiently, and then get to Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9 already, which could easily be on this list, but I figured I'd go with the Pixel Remasters because they're slightly more retro, but why stop with these when you could basically play the whole franchise on the go? These games laid the foundation of many of the JRPGs that we've all come to know and love. So if you're wondering what the hype is all about, or you want to revisit these like I did, there's really no better way to play these games. Unless you want to bust out the old PSP for Final Fantasy IV, the complete collection, baby. Next up, we have the Dragon Quest III HD 2D Remake. Holy smokes, what a way to play this classic. Go check out my video on this if you want to see my full thoughts and experience. What a grand adventure this was. But you want to talk about JRPG royalty, Dragon Quest III is that one. First released by Enix in 1988 on the Famicom in 1992 on the NES as Dragon Warrior 3. This was the game that made Japanese salarymen call in sick and students mysteriously vanish from school the day it dropped. And that's not a joke. It caused such a commotion that Japan had to regulate Dragon Quest release dates to weekends only. Chronologically, it's the first story in the Erdrick trilogy, a prequel to the original Dragon Quest and Dragon Quest II, and arguably the one where the series truly became Dragon Quest. It was the first to introduce party customization, a job system, and that classic "you're the descendant of a legendary hero" storyline that JRPGs ran with for the next 3 decades. And now we have it as a full-blown HD 2D remake. And not only does it look gorgeous, but it was the most accessible and definitive way to experience a game that helped define the genre. In Dragon Quest III, you play as the child of Ortega, a renowned hero who vanishes while fighting the evil archfiend Baramos. On your 16th birthday, the king summons you and basically says, "Hey, your dad was pretty awesome, but do you want to go save the world too? Because we can't find him." And your response? "Word, let me go get my homies." From there, you go get your homies by forming a party of your own, custom built from scratch, and set out across continents to fight monsters, explore dungeons, and uncover a twist that contextualizes the whole trilogy. As for me, I set off with a mage turned sage named after my oldest daughter, and we destroyed all the things. I mean, we saved. We saved all the things.
Oh, yeah, sure.
What makes Dragon Quest III's story so interesting is that while it starts with the classic go defeat the evil big bad and save the world trope, it slowly builds into something more meaningful, especially as you unravel more about your father and his impact on the land. Even if you've never touched a Dragon Quest before, this is a perfect place to start. It's the origin of the lore, and 1 and 2 are about to get the same modern treatment that they also deserve. And Dragon Quest III was the turning point for JRPG mechanics, specifically with the party customization and job system. And this remake showed us that it's still a ton of fun to play. First, like I said, you go make your own party at this tavern to kick off the adventure. And you could take some pre-builds, but it's way more fun to set them up yourself. Want a party of 4 thieves? Go for it. Want to recreate the Ninja Turtles with a monk, fighter, warrior, and mage? You can. But eventually, you'll want at least one sage, because they're totally insane. And speaking of sages, the job system that lets you assign a class to each character, your warrior, mage, cleric, thief, like I said, also lets you reclass them later at the All Trades Abbey to mix and match abilities. So yes, you can absolutely make a mage-warrior hybrid that flows fireballs and swings axes. Of course, I found that going full physical or full magic was the most helpful. To be fair, with sages, you learn everything. So having some support abilities learned first is also helpful. But do not skip the Monster Wrangler and help all of the monsters that you can find. You'll thank me later. Battles are classic turn-based, and the remake keeps the same traditional feel with some snazzy visual upgrades. You'll see familiar enemies, metal slimes, baby, towns, and dungeons, but rendered in this glorious HD 2D with dynamic lighting, weather effects, and more visual polish than you've ever seen on a Dragon Quest game. Seriously though, Square just keeps getting better and better with the HD 2D engine. I am loving it. And of course, there are quality of life updates here, like faster combat, better menus, saving anywhere, etc. They didn't reinvent the wheel, but they did show us how sparkly this wheel was all along. So if you're looking for a place to dive into the Dragon Quest franchise, or you're looking for a classic, cozy JRPG, look no further. It's approachable, visually stunning, full of heart, and for those of us who grew up with these kinds of games, it's really a reminder of why we fell in love with JRPGs in the first place. Don't skip this one. Seriously. Your future self will thank you. Now, before we get to my last official pick, there are so many honorable mentions that I could make here. So why not do a top 10 honorable mentions in a top 10 list? Most of these I just haven't got to yet, but they're certainly in my backlog, so let's go. Paper Mario Thousand Year Door. This is a legendary turn-based RPG that is bursting with personality, these really interesting looking mechanics, and some fan favorite characters. I would love to get to this one one, but I just haven't yet. So I'm adding it here as an honorable mention, maybe even for myself. Tactics Ogre Reborn. I haven't ever really gotten into this series, but it's kind of a cornerstone of the tactical RPG genre, which I absolutely love. I've heard about the customization, the narratives, the moral choices, and its impact on games like Final Fantasy Tactics, so I need to get to this one. Live Alive. This one obviously is more of an experimental RPG masterpiece that they brought back and over to the States with an HD 2D remake. I've heard amazing things about this, particularly from my buddy Slam. I need to get to this one soon. Collection of Mana. This is a treasure trove of action RPG nostalgia with these 3 iconic titles, including the long-lost Trials of Mana, which also has a remake. These games I have played, but some of the other games on here were just slightly stronger contenders, but I had to shout it out here anyway. Crisis Core Final Fantasy VII Reunion. This is more like a remake than it is a remaster, and this game was one of my favorites on the PSP. I've been super into the extended Final Fantasy VII lore, and this game is incredible as a prequel. You should definitely play it if you haven't and you're a fan of Final Fantasy VII. Tales of Symphonia. Oh, I want to put this on a list somewhere. I love this game. This got me into the Tales series, but there's some drawback here to the fact that the GameCube version runs better than the Switch version at 60 FPS. I don't think it's a game breaker. I think you should absolutely check this game out if you haven't before, but that means some of these other games edged it out. Fantasia Neo Dimension. This one is not really retro, but it's got a retro feel to it. It feels like a classic Final Fantasy. So I'm going to throw this in here as an honorable mention because it's my video and I can. This one is Sakaguchi Uematsu. Feels like a classic or an homage to a classic Final Fantasy, but everything's in this diorama style. There are some crazy hard bosses. It was super fun. I love this game. I probably need to do a dedicated video on it. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee. Listen, I know the catching mechanic for this one is not for everybody, but if you go back and play these games, the art style and the direction is incredible. I'm actually a little bit bummed that they're not keeping this art style for other remakes, because going from Let's Go Pikachu to Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is a bit of a disappointment in my opinion. Ni no Kuni 1 and 2. Again, not super retro because Ni no Kuni 2 is on the PS4, but the storytelling and the magical atmosphere, these feel like the spiritual successors to the golden age of PS2 era RPGs. If you haven't played them, you should definitely check them out. And finally, Advanced Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp. I am a huge Fire Emblem fan. I've heard that I would love these games. I just haven't got to them yet, and I absolutely need to. I have the game. It was given to me as a birthday present. I need to get there, and I will. But as of right now, I can't add it to the list because I haven't played it yet. And not to mention the Nintendo Switch Online, but perhaps that warrants its own video. Let me know if you'd like to see me do something like this, a top 10 for the NSO games. And now, without further ado, my last pick for this list, Chrono Cross. Chrono Cross was released in 1999 on the PS1, and right out of the gate, it had the unenviable job of being a sequel to Chrono Trigger, which, you know, just happens to be one of the most beloved games of all time. No pressure, right? But instead of giving us Chrono Trigger 2, Square did what Square did best in the late 90s. They got experimental and philosophical. This game is less what happens next and more what happens because. A story about consequences and timelines and the emotional fallout of choices made in Chrono Trigger. That being said, there are some direct connections. But if you've heard people say it's not a real Chrono Trigger sequel, I get it. But let it be its own thing and you'll realize it's kind of brilliant. Just not in the way people expected back in 99.
1999.
And then they added to the confusion by releasing a text-based visual novel prequel in Japan called Radical Dreamers, if you can even call it a prequel, which most fans never got to play unless they were fluent in fan translations. And honestly, it is more like a variation, not a prequel. I don't know, admittedly it's a bit confusing. But fast forward to 2022 and Square finally released the Radical Dreamers Edition, a remastered version of Chrono Cross with new artwork, arranged music, speed up features, and for the first time, the officially localized Radical Dreamers. And since then, we've gotten a patch that made it more playable than when it released. In Chrono Cross, you play as Surge, a quiet island boy who one day finds himself in an alternate dimension where he died as a child. Yeah, That's how we're going to start this thing. Really beautiful island, though. From there, it's a sprawling, melancholic story that explores identity, fate, and the impact of alternate realities. You'll meet a huge and diverse cast: pirates, robots, talking dogs, skeleton comedians, and Glenn. Wait, Glenn? Is it? Oh no, it's not you. And what decisions you make determines who can join your team. And yes, like I said, it is connected to Chrono Trigger, just not really in the way you expect. It's not a direct sequel, it's more like a thematic connection, exploring the consequences of time travel and the collateral damage it leaves behind. And if that sounds heavy, it is. Brain-breaking in some cases, but also weirdly charming, and funny, and deeply human in a surreal kind of way.
Humans are so weird.
I've often told my friends that after rolling the credits, I felt this emotional reaction that I didn't quite understand. I felt this game in some cases far more than I understood it. And the Radical Dreamers edition that they included, which is this playable text-based story set in this haunted mansion, served as kind of a prototype to Chrono Cross rather than a prequel. It's short, moody, poetic, and just being able to play it officially is kind of wild. I actually had a lot of fun with it. It felt so old school, but still totally works. And because it's different enough from the Chrono Cross story, it has some really interesting things to find from a lore perspective. But back to Chrono Cross. The team at Square decided not just to take risks narratively, but mechanically too, because this is another one of those not quite like any other JRPG battle systems. Battles are turn-based, but they use a stamina system where you choose how much energy to spend per attack. Light hits restore stamina faster, but heavy hits do more damage and risk missing. You're constantly balancing momentum. Magic comes in the form of elements, color-coded spells and abilities you equip on a grid. Each one has a limited number of uses per battle, and there's no MP bar here. Instead, you're strategically building out your toolkit based on the environment and the enemy type. Your ability to build up expands over time, and colors become more important as you progress. There's also a field effect system where the more you cast certain colored elements, the more the battlefield shifts towards that color, potentially powering up or weakening future spells. And finally, there's not really a traditional experience system, which was challenging for me because I love grinding.
That's what she said. Ha!
You do grow stronger through stat boosts gained after battles, but much of that is tied to story progression and exploration. It's a system that forces you to engage with the world, not just grind. And like I said, as a resident grinder,
That's what she said.
I can't say I hated it, even though it was kind of hard to get used to. It gives the game more of an inherent sense of pacing. And of course, with this remaster, you have quality of life features like speed up and slowdown options, auto battle, toggleable encounters, redrawn character portraits, HD models, and last but not least, the remastered soundtrack. And say what you will about this game, this soundtrack is, with no exaggeration, probably one of the best in JRPG history. And when this game launched, there was some complaints about the frame rate, but Square has updated this game to fix all of the launch issues. Chrono Cross is definitely one of the more experimental games on this list, but I really enjoyed it, and I would highly recommend it to anyone willing to give it a shot. Do I want a Chrono Trigger remake? Of course I do. I'm honestly a bit confused as to why they did this before Chrono Trigger, especially with all of the HD 2D love we've been seeing, but at the same time, this is the least popular of the two, so I can see why they might want to give it some space to breathe. But if you've ever loved a JRPG for its mood, its characters, the music, and its ability to make you, stare at the screen in silence when the credits roll, play Chrono Cross. I've certainly not played every retro JRPG out there, but I loved these and I would highly recommend them. But what retro JRPG remasters and remakes would you recommend? Let me know in the comment section below. And if you want to know what videos you should watch next, look no further than these bad boys. I'll have more coming soon, so subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya!